Hello, this is Parker Thomas, and once again I'm doing my video diary about Unit 2, which is about obscenity and indecency. So the first thing you should know is that it took a long time for us to get to this point of where we know how to determine obscenity. We've gone through lots of legal battles from about 1843 to 1973, each one getting more or getting less vague each time until finally we come up with the Miller test. The Miller test happened due to Miller versus California, which a man named Marcus Miller was giving out adult brochures with obscene material in it, and the wrong person got it. A restaurant owner got it, and he called the police. And when he called the police, this is where the case started. So as a result, the guy was actually found to be wrong for giving out this information, but the most important aspect of this is that we got the Miller test out of it. And the Miller test has 3 prongs that test for obscenity. The first one of those prongs is that by community standards, an average person using community standards finds the work as a whole to be prurient. And what prurient means is that it promotes lustful or sexual arousing thought. The second prong is that it's patently offensive, which means that it describes something, that it describes or depicts something such as masturbation, intercourse, or excretory functions, or flashing people in a graphic way. That's basically what patently offensive means, and that's the second prong. The third prong is the lapse test, which means that the work as a whole lacks a literary, artistic, political, or scientific value to it. If it fulfills all 3 of those prongs, then that means that the said work as a whole is considered obscene. Before we get into indecency, the difference between the two is that obscenity is not protected by the First Amendment, whereas indecency is, though indecency has limited protections from the First Amendment. So the book describes indecency as indecent material depicts or describes in terms patently offensive as measured by contemporary community standards for the broadcast medium, sexual or excretory activities or organs at times of the day when there is reasonable risk that children will be in the audience. Indecency isn't as graphic or in your face as obscenity, but it's still considered a hazard for children to come across it. And an example of this is FCC versus Pacifica. What happened here is that there was a radio broadcast of George Carlin's monologue, The 7 Dirty Words. A guy and his son, 15-year-old son, heard this monologue, and he complained to the FCC about it because he felt like children shouldn't hear that kind of material in the middle of the day. The broadcast was played at 2 p.m. So as a result, the FCC confronted the Pacifica Radio Company, and while they tried to defend themselves by saying that it was a satire and that they had a disclaimer, and that wasn't enough for the FCC, and the Supreme Court decided that the FCC has the right to protect the interest, the self-interest of children from hearing indecent material. Unfortunately for the radio company, they didn't get fined. So if you want to play indecent material, the best way to do this is to play it during Safe Harbor. And what Safe Harbor is during the times where you can play indecent material and you won't have to worry about getting fined. And this time is from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. because children realistically won't be awake during this time to see it. So if you're still confused on how to find indecency, the way you find it is by the explicitness or the graphic nature of the sex or excretory material. The second way is whether the work dwells on it or repeats at length references to the sexual or excretory functions. And the third one is, what is its context? Is it there to pander to you or titillate you, or is it there to educate you? And that's basically how you kind of determine whether something's indecent or not. An example would be if there's like a show that's talking about sex, like somebody calls in to ask an actual question about sex, and you get an answer for it, that would not be considered indecent because it's an educational purpose or an informational purpose. It's not there to arouse you, and it's not there to shock you or anything. So context matters when you are determining indecency. So a modern day example of this is in May of this year, there was an artist named Megumi Igarashi, and she created a 3D printed replica of her vagina. Now, she didn't get in trouble for that. What she got in trouble for was that she took the schematics to make it and she sent it out over the internet. And the Japanese court system was not having that, and they were going to fine her 400,000 yen, which is about $8,300. She's appealing it at the moment, but pretty much any sort of depiction of genitals is seen as obscene in Japan. In fact, the judge Mihoko says that although the data was flat and inorganic, it has the potential to sexually arouse viewers. That's very vague in comparison to the American standards. Japanese, unlike us, don't have a Miller test, and since 1957's court ruling, they ruled that anything that wantonly stimulates or arouses sexual desire or offends the normal sense of sexual modesty or ordinary persons and is contrary to proper ideas of sexual immorality is obscene. So that's a very vague thing compared to the Miller test. And that's any depiction of genitals. So there is no indecency in Japan. It's just all obscene. It's all against the law. So you got to be real careful. I'll have more information on the case in the description. I hope you enjoyed my video. And until next unit, I'll see you next time.